Hey folks, today we're covering Tinto Talks 59, and this week they're going to talk to us about Catholicism and the Associated Catholic Church International Organization for Project Caesar, aka EU5. And as we know, on Thursday they're going to talk to us about the Papal States and all the flavour around that. And then they do say at the end of this Dev Diary next week, we're getting further information about the Catholic Church and what happens with some of the major events that happened historically. So that's going to be very interesting to read through. But with this Dev Diary, they're just going to give us the basics, really. Well, not really just the basics, a lot of cool information here. And to begin with, we're going to look at Catholicism, the religion, the very building blocks of all this content. The Catholic religion is part of the Christianity religion group, and during the time frame of this game, we know some things are going to go down around all those religions as, certain events do play out. You can see the modifiers that Christianity gives. Max literacy for clergy, 25% better. That is a really good buff there. Maximum tax for the clergy estate, though, minus 100%. No taxing the clergy. The Pope, the Vatican, they need all that money, so you're not going to get any money out of these folks. Monthly reform desire, 0.03. They're going to talk about that later on. Monthly religious influence, 0.10. Papal ban on empires, yes. So no setting up your own empires, because the Pope isn't going to be too happy about that. Monasteries allowed, yes, obviously. Maximum religious influence plus 1,000. Very, very influential is the Pope, especially in this time frame. Cannot declare war on religious head without casus belli, yes. And then in the grayed out text, just a couple of the mechanics, I guess, that are activated if you have Catholicism. There's some religious reform. Again, they're going to talk about that later on. Reformed desire, College of Cardinals, the official religious head, and papal states have special status. The College of Cardinals, once again, going to have that in this game by the sounds of it before we get it in Crusader Kings, which is pretty wild, but that is how it goes. There is currently 85 million Catholic population in the world. We do know the Black Death will be coming soon to lower that number quite substantially. They are aware of 481 countries following the Catholic faith. Interesting that it says aware there. That's probably because IOs can affect a bunch of different things. So I guess there is a chance that an IO could affect a realm that you can't currently see, because differently to Crusader Kings again, there is the fog of war usually in these kind of games. So if you are coming from Crusader Kings, that is something you'll have to learn to deal with, or you can get a mod that just turns it off. But anyway, that is why I guess it says aware of, because some IOs you wouldn't be aware of everybody, especially depending on where you play on the map when you are playing. And then as we were discussing whilst looking at that tooltip, you cannot tax the clergy in your realm, but obviously the clergy themselves, they don't get to keep all that money. They have got to send it off to the Pope. So as you can see here, diplomatic incomes, the Catholic Church tithe, that is what they will have to send to the Pope. So they don't get to just hoard a bunch of money. I mean, they do get to hoard some of the money, as we know historically, but they do have to send a portion of their money, kind of the money they would have given you in tax. They instead send that to the Pope. So you will see that in the UI, and that is where some of the money is off to. Another key aspect of Catholicism is that all Catholic countries will belong to the Catholic Church IO. If you're not sure how international organization work, there was a dev diary about this quite a while ago. I will leave a link to it in the description down below. But as it says here, if your realm is a Catholic realm, you are automatically part of this IO, and the rules of that IO kind of take effect within your realm. And you can see them all on the map here. You've got the Kingdom of Hungary, you've got Brittany, the Kingdom of England, Portugal, the Crown of Castile, you've got Poland, Sweden, all the ones you would expect there to be Catholic. They're all rocking that IO as part of their realm. Next, they're going to look at the actual screen here for the Catholic Church. You can see religion, Catholicism, obviously. You can see Pope Benedictus XII with his cool hat and his regalia, and the cool art there in the background as well, showing off some fantastic art as well. Not very good there. Well, he's okay. He's the Pope. He doesn't need to be that good. He's getting everything anyway. And you can see the members, the 7 curia and 16 cardinals, 12 military orders, 76 bishoprics, and 483 total members. As you can see from this list, there are a lot of countries belonging to it. The list is expandable and scrollable, so that is how the kind of UI will expand, with some of them having special statuses. The bishopric and military orders are quite self-explanatory. If you've played any of these kind of games, you know how that's going to work. But the Curia and the Cardinals, they're going to give us some more information about those now, and these are some special mechanics for this church. So decisions concerning the Catholic Church are taken by the Curia, which is comprised of Cardinals. In Project Caesar, Cardinals are represented by a special building called the Cardinal Seat, available to be built by Catholic countries higher than county rank in any location where they already own a large religious building. Each cardinal seat will grant its own county a cardinal, which the country can use to influence the decisions of the Curia. Countries can have more than one cardinal seat and thus have more than one cardinal, which is why in the panel you'll see that there are currently 7 countries in the Curia, but a total of 16 cardinals among them. So it would sound like the first time you read this, like, oh, I'm just going to build a bunch of cardinal seats in my realm, but you do need to have a large religious building. I think that's going to be the limiting factor here. I imagine that's like full monasteries, something like, Canterbury or something. You need to have one of these large religious buildings to even be able to build one of these. And I imagine the requirements to build it are going to be quite high as well. You can see here the cardinal seat in Avignon. Definitely nothing goes on here in the future. This is a building, current level 1, maximum level here is 1 at the moment. Using cardinals to kind of use this building, which is pretty obvious. And then you can see, we talked about this in the video last week, they have changed this UI. I much prefer this version. It does shrink the size of the UIs a little bit. You can see the production requirements there to make sure this is working properly. And I like that it's got that gold look here. I don't know if that's because it's a religious building. I don't think we've seen it in that color before, but I like this a little bit more compact, but you can see everything that is required here. Having this building will have the following effects: clergy food consumption plus 20%. They're just stuffing their face with all the food whilst they're in this cardinal building. Max literacy plus 2.5%, which is something you will want to get if you can. Grants a cardinal, yes, as they've just said. And then it does also show the market access. I guess that is a requirement for some of the other mechanics around this as well, but it does show that in the same tooltip. Another aspect of the Catholic Church I.O. is its doctrines, represented by a set of laws. These laws are not something that can be easily changed, as it defines the core values of Catholicism, but some important events will be able to shape them, such as the Council of Trent, which they're going to talk about in a future dev diary. I imagine that's going to be next week's, but they are going to show us a couple of these law effects now. So you can see the first one here: papal authority can implement excommunication. They're going to talk about that later on as well. Monthly religious influence increasing, monthly devotion increasing as well. And then the papal authority allows the following policies, and a bunch of policies you are going to be able to change and mess around with if you are able to. The next one is the purchase of indulgences. Monthly religious influence 0.10, monthly gold 2 gold a month, is not the leader of the Catholic Church. Monthly religious influence 0.05. The purchase of indulgence allows the following policies. So some choices there if you do decide to implement or revoke this law, depending on what the setup is as you play through it. The next one is the marriage of priests. And obviously the clergy cannot marry, but that could change in the future depending on what happens potentially at the Council of Trent once they get into giving us more information about that. The next one is the persecution of witchcraft. Monthly progress towards humanist 0.10. If you are not the leader of the Catholic Church, population join rebels threshold -3%. Monthly progress towards humanist 0.5. The rebel threshold one is interesting. I guess it does fit into the theme of witches, and that could cause some trouble to happen in your realms historically. And again, there are some policies that you can change. I'm not going to try to pronounce them. I have no idea how to say those words. Next to the doctrines, they have papal bulls. You can see that in the UI here. These are actions that any Catholic country can choose to propose, but only those in the Curia can vote if they actually happen. Here are the possible bulls with some examples. So excommunication, and then again, a bunch of them here I'm not going to try pronounce, but you can see you can select to agree to this or select to disagree against this. And if enough of the Curia vote yes or no, that will then potentially change. You can see the first one here: antagonism impact -10% if this is implemented. And then the other example they're showing here is maritime presence +5%. That's actually pretty good. I probably would want to try get this. I mean, I guess if you're a coastal country, you'd want this, but if you're internal, it doesn't really help you that much. So I guess you might not want to improve how good the coastal realms are. It depends, I guess, in your situation. When voting for a papal bull, the interface will change slightly to show how many cardinals support each option. It goes without saying that the cardinals in a country will be aligned to vote for the same option, so the amount of cardinals a country have is effectively the amount of votes that it has. So really saying if, like as France, you have 3 cardinals, all 3 will always vote the same way. They won't change their minds. I wonder if there could be a cool mechanic around that, if they have some kind of trait or modifier which makes them like disloyal. Maybe they would change it. I think that could be quite a cool mechanic. So you'd want like loyal cardinals that would vote the way you would want them to, or at least all in the same way. I think it would be cool if there was some mechanic around that, which means that it wouldn't necessarily always happen, but it does sound like that is how it works now. And you can see that in the UI, simple yes, no, how many people are voting in which direction. Besides the papal bulls, you can also action excommunication, which is available to all countries of the Curia, which if approved will get the excommunicated country some very nasty modifiers and allow for a special casus belli. Obviously, if you play Crusader Kings, we have something kind of similar to this, but you can see here, excommunication. Excommunication is an international status of a ruler with severe religious and diplomatic penalties. All countries of the same religion gain a -100 opinion modifier, and they will also get the excommunicated ruler casus belli against that country. On top of this, the excommunicated country receives the following penalties until their next ruler, and you can see monthly religious influence 0.5 worse, monthly prestige 0.10 worse, tolerance of the true faith -5, papal relations -200. The Pope just hates you. Get out. You're excommunicated. You're a sinner. I want somebody more along my values, or even, just that's loyal to me to be in charge of that country. If you have this, you're probably going to get declared on relatively quickly by another Catholic country. The Catholic Church also has some extra aspects in the form of saints and holy sites. Saints are characters of a country that have been elevated to sainthood. A country could choose to canonize any of its previous rulers, and they will get benefits depending on the abilities of that character. I imagine this is going to be very expensive to do. I don't really want 400 saints with all these modifiers. I would imagine the modifiers aren't that big to prevent this becoming crazy good. Although maybe if that character is especially pious or just especially good, the modifiers will be pretty good. But again, quite hard to actually just keep doing it depending on what you are doing in your campaigns. Holy sites are special locations to the Catholic faith, giving some extra income to their owner due to the affluence of faithful in them. Again, we have holy sites in Crusader Kings, if you are coming from that game, and it looks like we're getting a version of that, but less modifiers and more income in this respect. So you can see again here, the saints that currently exist. You've got King David of Scotland, you got King Edgar, you got King Edward, and they're going to give bonuses. Unfortunately, it doesn't show us what the bonuses are, but you can see all those as you will see them in the game when it does come out. The next screenshot is the holy sites they were talking about. So you got Canterbury, you got Cologne, you got Santiago, the Holy City of Jerusalem. As they said, they do provide extra incomes. So if your realm has these, you are going to make that little bit more money. And I'm sure the Pope will be very happy if one of these holy sites falls into somebody else's hands and you get it back. I'm sure he'll give you a bit of an opinion modifier. We might find out more about that in the future. Next, they're going to show us the main religious panel for Catholicism. There are some extra religious actions available for certain countries besides the already mentioned option to canonize a character, the sainthood that we were just talking about. You can see primary religion, Catholicism, the unity, religious tolerance, tolerance of heretics, tolerance of heathens, how many holy sites there are. And then you can see religious influence, 1,100, reformed desire, none at the moment, no saints, and then religious actions, demand apostolic tax, request aid, and then the last one, which I'm not going to try pronounce, but yeah, my Latin isn't so good. But you guys can read plenty well, I'm sure. And what do these do? Well, demand apostolic tax is an action exclusive to the papacy, in which they can demand extra payment from those countries with the apostolic tax privilege enabled. Request aid is an action exclusive to military orders, in which they can ask to petition support to the Pope for their infrastructure, military, or coffers. So if you're playing as a military order, which we know you already can do, you can then get some money off the Pope and have your own little mini crusade somewhere potentially, or go after a realm that is currently ruled by heathens. The last one is an action available to kingdoms or empires that gives them some extra crown power at the expense of relations with the papacy. Let me know what you think about that last one. I see why it's there. I guess you're going up to the Pope and saying can you, release a proclamation that I am kind of sent by God or whatever, so people in your realm really see you as being more important because the Pope's kind of bigged you up a little bit and said how important you are. But I guess the cooldown on this and how much it costs is going to be the important thing. I don't want there to be a button that you could just mash and yeah, you're getting rid of relations with the Pope, but you're getting a lot of cool bonuses by getting that extra crown power. If you play Crusader Kings, I know I keep going back to it, but I'm sure many people watching this have played Crusader Kings. You can ask for gold from the Pope, and it's basically just a free gold button. You can just get your opinion high enough, and he'll give you ludicrous amounts of gold, basically for free. So it'll be interesting to see how that is balanced. And then the last thing they want to talk about is that reform desire that we saw earlier. In contrast to some previous titles by Paradox that also have this value, it is not a ticking clock for the Reformation, which, is hinting towards EU4, where that is basically how that happened. Instead, this is a modifier that will come into play during the Council of Trent. As such, they say we'll have to wait a little bit longer to find out how that's going to work. So that's all for today in this dev diary. Next week, they're going to resolve that cliffhanger by having a further look at Catholicism and what it has in store at the start of the game, including the situations for the Western Schism, Reformation, and the Council of Trent. So as you can see here, we're getting so much content, and this is just for the Catholic Church. Like, how much content are we going to get in this game when it comes out? Like, this could easily have been DLC in the future. Like, all these things here, even if we just got everything that we'd already talked about in the base game. But next week, they're going to talk about, as they say here, the Western Schism, Reformation, the Council of Trent, all these events that are going to be very pivotal to this religion and the rest of the world, really, depending on what options you take. So next week's is going to be a fantastic dev diary. And then they do end here by saying the Tinto flavor on Thursday instead of Friday due to the holiday is going to be on the Papal States. And that's going to give us a lot of information about the Papal States, events, mechanics that even they have. So not just the Catholicism mechanics. If you're in the Papal States, you're going to have a bunch of other mechanics as well. So that's going to be very interesting. So of course, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I'm covering this game up to official announcement, launch and beyond. And if you've done that, you've obviously already pressed the like button as well. That helps more than you know with getting other people to see my videos, and I would appreciate it a lot. But with all that being said, that is going to be the end of the video this week. Hope you have a good time till Thursday. We'll be back then talking about the Papal States, so I'll see you then.